What's up, legends? Today, I didn't expect to wake up to such good news, but thankfully, this is indeed the case. The patrol spawn rate, which is currently imbalanced for groups of players of less than 4 players, have now been acknowledged, and we have just gotten an announcement from the development team. They are indeed aware of how it's currently working and that players are not very happy about it, and they'll be changing how it works, back to how it used to be previous to the 1.0.3 patch. If you're a bit out of the loop and are unsure what I'm talking about, there was a major balance patch which happened about 2 weeks ago, where in this patch, the patrol spawn rates were significantly changed for groups of either a solo player, a duo, or a trio. The less players you had on a team, the harder you feel the difference. So for solo players, you'd see nearly twice as many patrols as you previously would, which would lead to a very discouraging approach of the game. And a lot of people would feel either forced to play with groups of 4 or dramatically lower their difficulties. The change was so significant that for a solo player, if you play today on difficulty 6, which is the medium range of difficulties, you'd encounter more patrols than you would previously on the hardest difficulty in the game, the Helldive difficulty. So let's take a look at exactly what was announced earlier today. Twinbeard posted this. As many of you have noticed, something has been off with patrols and spawn rate for some time now. This primarily leads to more enemies rearing their ugly heads than they're supposed to, indirectly to players feeling overrun, kiting, and subsequently less fun gameplay. This has been the case for all players, but predominantly for smaller teams and solo playing. We've been aware, but frankly, the past couple of weeks have been so hectic that we haven't been able to give this the TLC, that is, tender loving care, that it required. We now have, and we've concluded that it's not working as intended and we're changing it. There might be some minor tweaks, but overall, we're reverting back to how patrols and spawn rates worked before the patch that changed them a few weeks ago. We believe this is more or less how you currently want them to be. We also know you want us to do things and changes properly instead of rushing them, and we do as well. Therefore, implementing this will take some time. We want to give it proper testing and review it. Heck, simply see that it works this time. Even if this means we're faced with more bugs and bots than even the bravest of citizens would deem realistic for a while longer. We hope you're happy with us fixing the problem. Onwards and upwards. So we're looking at this update coming fairly soon, and I for one am very excited about it. It should bring a lot of passionate solo Helldivers back onto the fields. I for one, covering mostly solo content, know how frustrating it can be, especially against the automatons. Just having waves after waves after waves of hulks being thrown at you. As I said in my previous video, honestly for me, it would have been a good thing if it remained this difficult, as the more difficult our content is, the more appealing it is for someone to watch it, which would indirectly increase the value of my solo gameplay videos. However, I also had an idea of what kind of impact this would have and how it could potentially discourage a lot of solo players and duo players from playing the game, which is not really something Helldivers would want for their game, I'm sure. It's one thing if you release a co-op game where solo play is nearly impossible, like let's say Darktide or GTFO. It's extremely difficult to play solo, but for those games it's been like that since the beginning. On the other hand, Helldivers 2 was released in a way where solo play and duo play was indeed viable. It would just be more difficult than playing with a group of 4, but it still nonetheless remained viable, at least for most missions anyways. Realistically, there are some mission types that are nearly impossible to do so, but in a general sense, it is a very viable and challenging way to approach the game. To try to push off these players 3 months after the game's incredible release and success just wouldn't have made that much sense, and they're aware of that, which is why they've made the decision to revert that change. And with that in mind, I want to give you guys my honest thoughts and talk to you guys a little bit about a few things, especially about Arrowhead for a second. So I'm glad I made that video 3 days ago talking about these patrol rates, but I'll be honest with you. After I uploaded the video, there was a flood of negative comments and a lot of people were outright angry and a lot of people spoke very ill about Arrowhead and their approaches with their game. And to be honest, that made me feel really bad. It made me feel like the video was a bit of a rage bait, even though I didn't really mean it to sound that way. I was upset about the subject and I figured it was something important to talk about, especially since it's something that was very closely related to my channel's content. But I do want to clarify one thing. I think Arrowhead is fantastic at what they're doing, and in my opinion, they are doing an amazing job with this live service game that is Helldivers 2. Some people may disagree, but I really believe so. I have been playing games since 1999, and granted, communication between developers and players wasn't as possible as it is these days, but I have never been part of a game that is as transparent as Arrowhead development team is. Every time we reach out to them as a community, they respond to us in a very swift manner. That's something that a lot of us don't appreciate enough. Their speed. I mean, they are really freaking fast at handling issues we have with the game. A lot of people may think, oh, but they haven't fixed X or Y in several weeks. But as a content creator who's constantly paying attention to updates, I can tell you one thing. This game literally updates like multiple times a week. It feels like there's some sort of huge announcement every 48 hours. This game is literally as active as it gets. I played Counter-Strike previously for 10 years. If something is messed up or wrong about Counter-Strike, they will literally take months to address it, much less fix it. Take Counter-Strike 2 for example. It was released in September of 2023, and it took them 7 months to add the left-hand motto command, which is something that a vast amount of Counter-Strike players used to do in every other iteration of Counter-Strike. And that's coming from Valve, a multi-billion-dollar company and one of the most, if not the most popular game in the history of video games. Helldivers 2, on the other hand, it feels like literally all of our problems are heard. There are knowledge, they're addressed, and most of the times fixed within a few weeks at best. We're talking about a studio that is literally on our side against their own publisher, trying to keep their game available for everyone. We're also talking about the studio whose CEO is more active on answering questions on Twitter and being actively involved in the growth and changes of its game than he even needs to be. I mean, he could literally just avoid answering questions and complaints and let his community managers handle it, but he goes and handles it himself. And when an issue is brought up, he himself will let us know that he'll speak with the team to get it adjusted. I feel like that deserves a hell of a praise. Arrowhead, through all of the ups and downs, you have my utmost respect, and I will always remember your studio as one of the most down-to-earth studios I've ever come across. Continue doing exactly what you guys are doing. You guys are doing great. To be clear about one thing, I do believe we must continue to talk about the things that may worsen our experiences about the game. After all, that is very important for them as well. For example, I deeply believe their overly careful approach to adding weapons and nerfing weapons isn't really something I agree with. But that has also been addressed by them, and they're having internal conversations about it. I just think Arrowhead deserves a little bit more love, and I think a lot of people go a little bit too hard at them. I for one can feel their hard work and their passion, so for that, they have my utmost respect. I will continue to call out things I deem wrong with the game, but I couldn't go on without showing my respect for Arrowhead. Thank you guys very much for watching the video. Now let's get back to killing some fucking bots, because we've got like 500 million bots to go. Peace!